Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Art of the Bay Sessions. On this episode, we chat with our good friend Arvin. But before that, make sure to hit that subscribe button in order to see future interviews and more content. With that being said, let's hit into the interview. Thanks again.
And now, we chat with the animated Arvin Bautista, featuring his latest YouTube series, Comix Rant.
Cool. So thank you once again for joining us for the show. And I want to thank you for making the time to do this. So I really appreciate it.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Yeah. So everyone, this is Arvin Bautista. He's a good friend of mine the last few, I want to say probably like the last 10 years or so, which I can't really believe, you know?
Oh man, it has been that long.
Yeah.
Yeah, dude. That's a long time.
Because I was just talking to my other friends who I worked at Sony and Zynga, and I was like, yeah, like it felt like forever that we did this or this. And I was like, yeah, that's actually been like 10 years now. So it's kind of crazy when you actually think about it.
That is nuts. Now I feel super old. Thank you.
yeah, of course. That's what I naturally try to do out with these interviews. So yeah, I definitely wanted to congratulate you, of course, on your new YouTube video series, Comix Rant, and especially with your ongoing comic book series, The Bomb Squad. So I definitely wanted to make out the time to go over stuff like that.
Yeah. Thanks for having me over. It was just kind of like one of those things, COVID-19, and everybody's stuck at home. So
what better time to like bring all these creative projects together when you have the time to do it, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. So yeah, I guess one of the questions I've been asking folks is like, what were some of your like art influences growing up as a kid?
Oh man, all that's in my head is comic books, dude. So like, it's kind of sad, but like, it's what I know.
Yeah.
Like growing up, like I think someone was asking me like, what was my favorite comic book? Or sorry, how old was I when I started reading it?
Oh, okay.
And I can't remember. I can't remember.
Yeah.
Because I've just been reading it for that long.
Yeah.
So like the main influences that I can think of are comic book guys. So it would be, I was reading books like in the 80s and 90s, so mid 80s, 90s, even before that. So it was like John Byrne, George Perez. I don't know if you know these guys, but they were like these, John Byrne like rebooted Superman back in mid 80s or something like that. So he made them all cool again.
Yeah.
And then George Perez like drew Crisis and Teen Titans. So it's like super detailed. I don't even draw like that, but like it's just one of my influences. And then like way back for the comic book stuff that I'm doing now, it's I was pulling off of the work that Osamu Tezuka did. So the guy that made Astro Boy.
Oh, nice.
The guy that made Astro Boy, and the guy that made Cyborg 009. I don't know if you know that series.
Mm-mm.
Also super old, but that dude worked under. So Osamu Tezuka is like the Walt Disney of Japan. So like everybody was working with him. So this guy, Shotaro Ishinomori, worked with him, and that dude made like Mask Rider Black. I think Power Rangers. He did that kind of stuff. So all that kind of stuff like came from him. It was awesome.
Yeah.
So he's kind of like one of my earlier art influences as well, like just subconsciously in my head.
Yeah. Did you ever at that point, was it more that you just kind of followed those things, or were you able to find anything? I know like back in the day we didn't have like the internet and everything. So
yeah.
How did you go about like getting more information about his work, or was it more just following those things?
Oh man. So a lot of that stuff I didn't even know, like, I just, Astro Boy was cartoon. So I would just watch that, and I didn't, when you're a kid, you kind of don't know people's names, like the specific artists of doing this kind of stuff, but then you kind of know what their stuff looks like.
Yeah.
So in comics, I think it was easy for me to like, open a book and I'll be go, hey, this is the guy that I like. And then, the older I got, then I'd look at that who drew it and who did that stuff in the book itself. So then I would start like I'd start recognizing styles. So maybe that's kind of like what drew me to comics.
Oh, okay.
Because I could see like, oh, this guy drew it and that guy drew it, or I didn't like this guy and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And but the older I get, then I'll still have some of those comics. So then I'll look it up and then I Google up some of these people. And I gotta tell you, social media is so awesome. Like,
oh yeah.
I tracked some of them down on Twitter.
Oh wow!
And like, I'm like, hey, I'm totally nerded out on these guys.
Yeah.
But they're like, they're just normal guys, so they totally loved it. They would be like, hey, thanks, and you could talk back to these guys, right. Or they would talk back to you. They would respond, and it was just so awesome. Like, because I'll find them and I'll be like, man, I read this guy's stuff in the 80s. I was in high school, and he's still around doing his thing, and there's some of them are like kind of forgotten. Back then you would only have letter columns to get in touch with some of these guys. Right now it's like Twitter, so now it's like Twitter's evil, but at the same time, it's also very awesome because you can get in touch with all these people.
Yeah, I think it's the kind of the equivalent when we were doing still like Comic Cons or just like local like con events where when you would go up to them like either as like a fan or as a vendor that they would totally make the time out to like just chat with you about like either their work or just like comics or art in general, and I thought that was always pretty cool.
Yeah. So a friend of mine that kind of got me into trying to do this YouTube channel stuff, he was saying that the comic scene, whatever that he's in now, is kind of like a con, like kind of except you're online, right? Like it's kind of like a next best thing, because then like you guys, he'd have like live streams, and then people can interact and ask questions, or just goof around or whatever, with the streams. And he was saying it's kind of like, so he would do it while he's painting.
Oh, okay.
And then people would just like ask him questions, go, hey, dude, that's cool looking, or, whatever. And he said like, that was like one of the closest things you could get to, like if you were like set up in a convention.
Yeah.
But online, especially now that we can't really go out and have like conventions like that.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, like as I mentioned earlier, you and I first met when we worked at Zynga and on Cityville and all these projects.
Yeah, man.
But with some of the folks that are just getting familiar with your work, maybe you want to give us like a brief timeline of like your art career overall, like just.
My gosh, Fernando, that's good. Let's see. So I've been in the industry for like 20 plus years. Mm-hmm. I started. Or in games. Yeah. So I started in games, I think a year after I was doing commercial animation. Mm-hmm. It was like at this small company called Digital Eclipse, which switched to Backbone Entertainment. Yeah. And then it got absorbed into this big umbrella company called Foundation 9. Yeah. But that place was cool because I was there for like 10 years. It was a long time, 10 or 11 years. Yeah. But they were doing Game Boy Color games. Oh, yeah. So that was awesome. Like, and I love games. Like, that's the thing that I kind of love. That's my other passion is games. Yeah. And so it was fun to learn like why things look like that, or why their colors are so low, or why is it so low resolution. Yeah. And I cut my teeth there, and that was a lot of fun. And then that's when I moved to Zynga. So Zynga was a whole different world. It was a whole different breed of games. I thought I would know what it was. But, when you go there, it's a totally different thing. It's like Facebook games, we were on Cityville. So Facebook games, live games, I didn't know what that meant. I had no idea what that meant at that time. Like I was like, what does that mean? Yeah. But, it's kind of crazy because then there was always content that we would have to pump out. Like it was, I think, 3 times a week, or it wasn't like 3 times a week at one point. Yeah, when it was at its peak, there was like literally like 3 or like a daily release every day. So it was just daily, which is insane. Yeah, it is insane. And but it was great. It was a great experience. And then after Zynga, I'm surprised I actually lasted at Zynga for that long, because Zynga is just pardon the pun, dog eat dog.
Yeah.
That company is crazy.
They lived up to their mascot.
They did. And then after that, I worked at Achille Interactive. So I knew someone from Backbone that had moved over to Achille, and it was like, I didn't know what it was, but it was like, games as medical treatment. Oh, so which is kind of crazy. And at that point, when I was looking, I didn't know what that was. Like I just wanted to contract with them. I wasn't looking for like a permanent job. But it ended up to be one of the better places that I've worked at. Like, work from home, what was it? 3 times a week. I work from home 3 times a week. Everybody's like senior. So everybody's like, you would appreciate this. Everybody knew what they were doing. Right. What they were doing. So everybody's expectations were realistic. You know what I mean? Yeah. So that was fantastic. And then that company released the world's first like FDA approved video game. Oh, so that's a plus. Yeah.
What was that game?
So it can it's called Endeavor RX, and it's they've been doing studies to see how games can treat people with ADHD.
Oh, that's cool.
And compare that with drugs. Right. And it's pretty amazing. Like, while I was working there, I had no idea what was going on. Right. It's all like science, but for a good cause. And they were able to quantify like the effect of playing this type of game. Basically data science. So it's basically like Zynga. Yeah. Right. Yeah. They would look at the data and they could see that it actually did help people that had ADHD to a certain degree, right? Right. So like it could be an alternative to using just pure drugs. Right. So you could actually have games doing this kind of stuff. So it's kind of cool.
Yeah. Wow, that's crazy. Like, I also started getting in my latest company into educational games. So I definitely can appreciate when like the gaming is going to like good cause as opposed to like, Bingo, where it was kind of this monopoly of money going to. But I guess for me too, like this is kind of like a guilty pleasure I have when I meet people who also came from Zynga. I always ask them the same question, like, how did you like what was your way in to get into Zynga? Okay. So it's very specific with me. So a guy that I worked with at Backbone, Brian Steffel. Oh, okay. Yeah. You know Brian, right? Yeah, and Sach. Sach. So I used to work with them. Yeah. At Backbone, and they came from like Crystal Dynamics or something like that. 3DO and that kind of stuff. Yeah. So he got hired for the job that I ended up doing by Matt Levine. I don't know if you remember. You remember Matt Levine. You remember Matt, yeah.
So art director for Cityville. So he hired Brian Steffel, and Steffel, I guess, worked there for a good, a few months. And then I think one of his other applications contacted him, and this was at EA. Oh, okay. So he got contacted by EA after all these months or whatever that he was waiting around for it. And it's EA, so you gotta go. Yeah. So he's basically leaving Zynga, but he was good friends with Levine. Yeah. So he felt bad. So Steffel was like, "Hey, I know this other guy that I used to work with. Maybe we can bring him along." So he actually contacted me and said, "Hey, I feel bad leaving Zynga. Yeah. Can you take the position that I was in?" Right. And I was like, all right, I've been here for 11 years. Why not? Yeah, sure. I'll try. I had no idea what I was getting into. I had no idea what I was getting into. Yeah. Wait, how did you get to Zynga?
So I kind of a similar story where I was working at Namco at the time, and same thing where I was only there for about 3 months. And then my buddy who I worked with at Sony had just gotten hired full-time at Zynga. So then I think this was at the time where they were still doing contractor, and I think they still do on occasion. So they had a couple of contractor positions open. So then he let me know. I did the interview, and kind of the same thing. I felt bad that I was only there for 3 months at Namco, but then I just heard all the benefits that came at Zynga, so
Oh man,
I kind of wanted to give it a shot at that point.
wait. So were you full time at Namco at that point?
No, I was also doing contract work.
Oh, contract. Okay.
But still, like, it was more of that at that point too. The commute was a bit long since they're out in Santa Clara. So
Oh yeah.
I think it was a matter of like the benefits that Zynga had, and also still the convenience of Bart to be able to just ride into the city at that point.
Oh yeah, man. Zynga perks are unparalleled.
Yeah. So we'll definitely go back to Zynga stories, because I know we have
It's so good.
we have a collection of those. I kind of wanted to get more into like your transition from originally starting off with like comics in 2D going into 3D, because I would imagine that at our age we didn't really have computers and 3D modeling that we were getting into as kids. So
Nope.
I would imagine that you started off doing traditional 2D and then going into 3D. So maybe if you wanted to give us a little bit of like how that happened, like how did you go from that transition from 2D to 3D?
Yeah. So I went to school at the Rhode Island School of Design. And so at that time, it's very traditional traditional art, basically, right? Like painting, charcoal drawings. They had a film, animation, video major, but it wasn't like anything like computers. At that point, okay, when I was going there. So that's like, I don't know how long ago was that? 22 years ago, or longer than that. Much longer than that. So it's very traditional. So when I got out, I was looking for a job that was hand-drawn 2D animation.
Right.
So I knew how to do that kind of animation. We never really. The only computer stuff we did was like D-Paint. I don't know if you remember D-Paint. It's like it's like MS Paint animated stuff, and then like I forget what it was, Strata Studio Pro. I think it's some kind of 3D program, but it was only like a side class.
Yeah.
So nothing much. Everything else was traditional: oil painting, acrylics, that kind of stuff. So when I came out and I was looking for a job, my portfolio wasn't really very sellable. Like, it wasn't traditional animation either. It's very kind of like experimental animation.
Right.
But then a friend of mine, so I was going to this Bible study class, and a friend of mine, her boyfriend worked at this video game company. Oh, okay. So this whole time I was looking for a job at like big animation studios, 2D animation studios, movie, whatever. But I'm in the Bay, right? All that stuff is in LA.
Yeah.
So I wasn't able to find any of that stuff. I would do commercial animation stuff.
Oh, okay.
But even then, it wasn't like that solid. It's contract work.
Right.
And I'm okay. This story is getting convoluted, but I'm like, I'm not from this country, so I was on a student visa.
Oh, okay.
And that would run out a year after I graduated.
Right.
So I needed a permanent job, and strangely enough, video games was more permanent than animation. Right. So that's how I landed at this place, and Digital Eclipse had a huge hit on the Game Boy Color with Tarzan. So the Tarzan movie came out.
Right.
So this is how long ago it was.
Yeah.
Tarzan movie came out. They did a movie tie-in on Game Boy Color, and they used hand-drawn animation from the movie that was supplied to them by Disney.
Oh, okay. Uh-huh.
It was a big hit. It's a fairly standard platformer, but it was just so well produced.
Right.
Like, when Tarzan was running, he looked awesome. Like, he looked like the movie. He looked like you were playing the movie.
Yeah.
It felt very organic. So I think they wanted something similar on their next games.
Right.
Now that I think about this in hindsight. So I think that's how I got in. Plus, my D-Paint, my D-Paint portfolio, which is horrible.
Yeah.
Because it's low res. It looks like Game Boy Color stuff.
Yeah.
So I totally lucked out into it. To this day, I still thank my art director, Boyd Burgrabe, who like hired me and took like a chance on me because, you know, I didn't have anything for that.
Right.
Anyway, okay, so then that company was all traditional 2D stuff.
Right.
And then I think this is where Sach and Brian come in. They were 3D artists. So this is later. This is like maybe 5 years into my time there, 4 years, 3 or 4 years. And the industry is shifting to 3D. And this is like PlayStation 1, Saturn, like, you know, those consoles. Yeah. So like, I think PSP was coming around. So we're trying to get into that market. And I felt like I need to get into that market. Like I need to survive, like as an animator. So I need to learn it, you know, like at a certain point, like I love sprite animation, but at a certain point it's like, okay, I need to learn this.
Yeah.
And they took a chance on that too. So they actually threw me onto this Mucha Lucha game.
Oh, nice.
Do you remember Mucha Lucha?
Yeah.
It never got released. It was supposed to be on the PS1, but Brian Stuffel was the art director.
Okay.
So, but he didn't know me. Nobody knew me. They were all 3D, so nobody knew me there. But because I was begging my art director, hey, put me into 3D. I'm going to, you know, I want to learn it.
Right.
This was still in a company that was small enough, but it could take that risk that they could actually put me into the budget of that. Like, you know, totally rookie 3D animator. I didn't know anything.
Yeah.
I didn't know anything about 3D animation.
Yeah.
So they threw me in there and I totally cut my teeth there. And it was awesome. Like, you know, the people that helped me along, I still remember them. You know, Brian is one of them. Mm-hmm. These other guys that helped, that had like the best rigs, you know, and I just had fun. Like, if anything, like learning 3D through animation is probably the easiest way out of all the disciplines that you have to figure out. Like texturing, rigging, modeling. Like animation is probably the easiest way to slide in there, like to kind of figure out how things work. And that's kind of how I transitioned. After that, I just didn't look back. I just kept doing 3D.
That's awesome. Like, so at that point, did you just like learn on the job, I guess, with how to use like the 3D programs and everything?
Yeah, dude. All my mistakes, like, oh man, I kept bugging the people around me. Like I had set people that I would bug in a cycle in my head, right? Because I didn't want to bug people for too much.
Yeah.
Like, so it'd be like this guy first, and then the girl behind me, and then this dude, and then that dude, and it was pretty hilarious. Like, and I don't think it was like at a time when YouTube.
Oh yeah.
I don't even know if YouTube was that big yet. I mean, it was there. Yeah. But you know, you can go into YouTube and go, how do I make this in Maya? It was Maya. So they taught me Maya, which is, I think it worked out because even today, right? Like to this day, Maya is still kind of like a standard for animation, especially. 3D Studio Max was kind of more like something that people like to use for modeling. It has its animation stuff, and people still do use it. But because like the artists that were there wanted to learn new things and preferred to use Maya, I learned that. So that was one of the first things that I learned.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Like, yeah, my experience too with just transitioning from both 3ds Max and Maya, like it was a learning curve. So I can only imagine like being able to do that in a working environment where, like for me, it was more, it was at school. So it was easy to like always poke like the teacher or like your classmates. But I would imagine that the environment's a little harder when like people are trying to get their work done and you're
it's very hard. Plus, like you feel like you know, am I going to lose my job because I don't know what this is? Like you know, because I don't know what a vert is. Like I don't know what is a vert color? I don't know.
What's the difference between a face and a vert and all these?
Oh my gosh! Yeah, totally. It's kind of crazy. I wish I could remember more of it, but it was just so. Like it was just like an information dump on my head. And I swear, I must have asked a few people the same question over and over because it didn't quite click into my head yet. At that point. But I'm so glad that, you know, they took the time to help me. And to this day, like for me, like I actually have no problems. Like if people ask me like how to do something, or like, if they see, like, you can kind of see like if someone's a little wary to ask you, I try to make them comfortable. Like, oh, don't worry, like, and that's the kind of people that I kind of like working with. Like, there is no, even in the senior level, there is no, I don't know, air of like, trying to be better than you,
right.
or pretending that they know everything, because you can't know everything. So like, this other guy I worked at Achille, he's pretty senior, but I'll ask him something and it's cool because he's very upfront and he'll say, I don't know, but let's try to figure this out together.
Exactly. Yeah,
it's like, oh my gosh, that's amazing.
Yeah. I think those are the best kind of either coworkers or mentors that are best, because you're trying to like, they've probably been in that same spot as you, like at some point of their life. So it's kind of like it's full circle. They're also giving back to people like that. So I think, when you meet those people, it is very special, where you're just like, okay, cool. Like, they understand that I'm also trying to like learn, but I'm not bug them 24/7. Like, there's a reason why I poke them for something, and then I'll make sure that I hammer it in that like once they teach me how to do it, then I'll fully learn that skill set,
Yeah.
So speaking of YouTube, like, since you had mentioned it, I know that you just started doing the Comix Rant YouTube series. So how did that come about? Like, I know obviously like the main reason for a lot of these projects that we've all been doing is because of the current situation, but has it always been like an idea or a concept that you've been wanting to try out from before?
It has not. So this is like super recent. This is literally during quarantine that or shelter in place. Quarantine sounds horrible, but it's the same. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
But a friend of mine, he has an Indiegogo campaign. He has a couple of Indiegogo campaigns. He uses it to kind of interface with the people that are backing him. So he'll do live streams. And, he'll do paintings of his stuff, and people can take a look at it. And he told me, so we went to school together. We went to college together, and we both love comics. We love comics. It's like in our veins. So he was saying, like, he liked being able to interact with people in this way. And he said that, these channels, like, for him, it's self-promotion, right? At the end of the day, it's self-promotion. It is what I'm doing. But he was saying, like, because it's like kind of what we liked as fans, right? Like, we're just talking about, like, if I got to meet my influences, like in a convention, I'd be wigging out. It'd be awesome. It'd be the best thing ever, right?
Yeah.
So he's saying, like, that's kind of like how it is for him. Not like we're like big stars or anything. It's just that we're able to talk to the people that like our stuff, or we can put our stuff out there and people can interface with us and try to make it as easy for them to interact with us, right? And that's a big deal, like, that you can do that. And at the same time, so the plus for us is he's saying, like, okay, there's some YouTube people that just do their thing and that is their livelihood, right? Like these channels.
Right.
That you get like all these likes and subscribers and so on. And it's great. It's awesome, right? But for us, we can do that too, but we also have something to sell. Yeah. Right. So at the end of this episode that I just did, I actually worked on something, like, for me personally.
Yeah.
And I think that was the draw for me. Definitely to like try to get my stuff out there in video form. But I've always liked process stuff, just in general. Like, I like process stuff. Like, I like seeing other people's process. I don't care if it looks ugly. Like, it's fine. To be able to get something out at the end of that is also like kind of, so like YouTube, right? Your presence has to be there by like putting out videos every week if you can, or as frequent as you can, blah, 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 blah. So at the same time, the real like draw for me is like, since I'm pumping out at least like an hour of whatever, of work, right? That means I'm going to get an hour of work into my comic book like every week.
Yeah.
So that's like a boon. Like it kind of helps me keep on schedule, I think, or keep on track, right?
Yeah.
And then hopefully, maybe it's a fail or it'll succeed that, someone will watch the channel, but I will also have my comic book. So
exactly. It's like a win-win
selfish
situation.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Because I think that's the same thing too, where I was the same way with, I'm pretty sure you were the same way with DVDs as a kid, where you would always watch like the behind the scenes or the extras that came with whatever.
Yeah.
Like even if it was like a full motion movie, there was still like concept art and storyboard. So those are all the things that I would always watch, even if it was animated or live action, just to see like the same thing, the process and the behind the scenes of like how it takes the production from start to finish on how to create things. And now to me as an artist, like I really love all these platforms like YouTube or Twitch, because it's kind of like how you mentioned that before we never got to see that, and now like we're actually being able to see like people's work throughout like the entire process, which I think is
yeah, it's awesome and depressing at the same time, because I'll like watch process on some of these guys and I'm like, wait, he didn't sketch anything.
Right.
He's just straight up drawing in ink. And I'm like, what? How is this possible?
which was actually perfect, because that was one of my questions that I was going to ask you, where in one of your videos I had seen that you kind of do something similar, where you just go in there and just like start drawing, where as long as you have like an idea of like what the start, middle, and end is, like you kind of freestyle and start going with the story as long as you hit those points. Was it something that you always did with all your projects, or was there something that made you kind of go that kind of more freeform route when you started doing your comics?
I think so, I was drawing comics like since I was a kid. Like, I still have some of them when I was like 5 or 6, and like, so I think I enjoyed doing comics like that, right? And you get older. So that's when I was a kid. And then like around like high school and college, you kind of like learn the formal way to do it, like whatever, 3-act structure, all this kind of stuff, like protagonist, antagonist, and all this kind of stuff. And, it's all good. And then you get older and in the back of my head, like I still want to make comics. But it took me so long. Like, it took me so long to write a script, and and it kind of like, for me, this is personal, right? For me, it just drained the joy out of it, I guess, for me, right? Like, or by the time I get like a script out, or wrote something down, like my brain just wouldn't engage in it anymore, right? Like I already knew what the outcome would be, so it was done.
Yeah.
So part of the fun was kind of gone. So with the comics that I'm doing now, with like the Bomb Squad stuff, or like the Inktober stuff,
right?
It's just freeform because it's kind of fun. Like, it's almost like this weird cliffhanger you give yourself. Like, how do I get out of this? Like, I know I need to go from here to here, but now anything goes in between, right? Like, and some of the best stuff is by accident. Like sometimes I'll kind of run into it, or sometimes I'll stew on the answer and then I'll come up with something better. Or if I'm in a rush, it'll have to be something smarter. Like, all that kind of stuff. And I think it's kind of fun like that for me personally. So that's kind of how it ended up.
Yeah. No, and I think I'm very similar in that sense, where there's a certain mindset and expectation that you get from like art school or college in general, where you get taught like the entire process. So once when you don't have the experience of having job experience for that role, then in your mind you think you have to like follow everything by the book. So it's not until you actually start going into that field of work that you really start developing the confidence to be able to do that, where you go about it your own way or like at your own pace, versus actually like doing it line by line, like how people have told you how it's supposed to be.
Yeah, I think I would not have any work done if I did. I think that's the main driving force here. Like, I just need to make something.
Yeah. And yeah, I guess that was the same thing too at Zynga. Like, and maybe you can follow up with this too, where when I started at Zynga, it was the same thing where I finally got exposed to that whole angle of like the production flow from like
Oh man.
the beginning of like, okay, this is where designers come up with the game, then it gets passed off to the artist to do like the concept and everything, then it goes to the developers and that whole cycle.
Yeah.
So for me, it was an eye opener of like actually seeing like how things work, and like there is a structure, but the way how you get from start to end, it's really up to you and like the team. So I guess in your experiences, is that what you kind of envisioned too, where like you had this idea that people kind of told you how to expect it from like childhood or even college, versus like what you actually saw when you actually were working at a big company, seeing like, did it meet your expectations, or was it like a totally like mind-blowing experience to see like how an actual production cycle was from like not having that experience beforehand?
Okay, so let me see. Oh, okay. So I guess I had no expectations on how something was supposed to happen, especially on my first job.
Right.
Because it was also games, right? So it's like not at all what I went to school for. I went to school for illustration / film, right? So I didn't even know what the structure was.
Exactly.
And maybe because this place that I started off was smaller, so there is structure, right? There's like, just like you said, but because it's smaller, I had to do a lot of different things, right? Like I wasn't just an animator, and especially then in sprites, right? You're an artist, so you are expected to do backgrounds, special effects, props. Sure, like the characters, of course, but now like now you're expected to fill out maps, right? Design maps, or like maybe someone needs like so like game designers, right? Usually they would make like a grid of the map, and then I'll fill it, and then I'll fill it out. Okay, now I know that's probably the best way to do it, right? So I'm not doing the game design. I'm the artist, right? I shouldn't be doing game design. But in that company, it was like Wild West, like, so, maybe the designer was just so swamped and he can't get to all that stuff. He was stuck in game design document land. And so now like I had to make levels, I like gameplay levels for fun, right? Or I would lay out a chunk of it, and then he'd go in there and then put where the bad guys would spawn. But he never laid out the map. So how would he know where would it be fun? Like, it was just kind of like, and it was awesome. And maybe that's the worst way to work, but it was kind of awesome because it was just kind of like this crazy flow, right? Like as a team, like you just kind of had to stretch yourself in a certain place. And sometimes it got kind of like people would stick their hands in like places that they shouldn't be in, but it was just one of those things where you just had to get everything done. So then I think once I got into 3D, I think this is where it started getting more of a structure. Like 3D is so big. There's a dude that makes the rig, right? Like that's not even animation stuff, right? That's a whole science in itself. Somebody models the character. That's also something else, right? And then there's a guy that animates it. There's a person that makes the environments. It's just so big. And that opened my eyes again, like to this structure that has to be there. Because, and I definitely had to be part of that production pipeline. Like, I had to be in a certain place. And I did learn actually a bunch of those things. I learned like modeling, rigging, texturing, animation, and then kind of like getting into the game and all that kind of stuff because the company was so small. So I kind of liked it like that. And then at Zynga, that's kind of like where you kind of feel that like, okay, I can only do this because I can't really stretch out to do all this other stuff.
Exactly.
And I think at a certain point you can still kind of like do all these different tasks if you wanted to, right? Like they always tried to promote that there.
Yeah.
And I kind of like working like that. And I miss working, especially with sprite animation stuff, right? Because all that stuff is drawn,
right?
Basically, and I kind of liked drawing everything.
Yeah.
Like if there was a special effect you wanted, then I just draw it. I'd animate it for you. If there was a prop that you need, I'd draw it. Backgrounds, I'll draw it.
Yeah.
But in 3D, it's all about like, oh, you gotta have somebody else do it, and it makes sense, right? Because not one person can do it.
Yeah. I think for me, my kryptonite is definitely rigging, because it's just like it's such an art form in itself that
it is.
I give so much props to like riggers, and just like it's like how you mentioned, it's a literal science that you do to get that going.
But it's okay, Fernando. They have like programs that'll like automatically generate that stuff for you nowadays.
Yeah, not nowadays. not anything back in the day.
Yeah.
It's funny because the one person that comes to mind when you mention like having so many different hats, especially during our time at studio, it always goes back to Tammy. Tammy.
Oh yeah. Oh my gosh.
She technically was supposed to just be a producer, and she knows how to do everything, and that's
it's kind of crazy.
Yeah. It's literally like if we were falling behind on something, that she would just like jump into that role and just start doing.
She was like a powerhouse. I always liked how she's like this small girl that is like seemingly quiet.
Exactly.
But she's like a beast on the inside.
Yeah. One of my genuinely favorite people in the world, and I just, as soon as you said it, I was like, I have to give her a shout out based on that's like the core emphasis of someone who's like can do it all at that point.
You jump in, totally.
So I guess another question. I think I already know the answer, but just in case if I didn't assume it. So what are some of your hobbies when you're not doing art?
Oh, games.
Yeah.
Well, reading comics, games. I know it's a shame. I was thinking like, what? Do I have any other hobbies that I do outside? No, I don't. I wish it was something cool like rock climbing.
I mean,
games.
I think that's a lot of the thing too, where when I first started at Sony, a lot of the people there were, when I started there at QA, there would be a lot of people who would put in, like 8 hours a day and sometimes even do overtime. And then it would still go home and still go play other games. And it just kind of showed like their passion for like what they wanted to do. So in this case, I don't see it as a bad thing where like, if you're doing art and then on your spare time, you're still doing something associated with that, just because it just shows like how passionate you are about like what you're doing, where you don't see it as a job in the first place,
Oh yeah. I mean, there's many forms of it too, right? Yeah. Like of making art. So, I mean, even now I'm like trying to teach myself all these different programs and stuff, and it's all very fun. Sometimes like I get a little like all over the place because like, oh, I want to learn this. I want to learn this. I want to learn this. And there's so much stuff out there that you can learn, you cannot possibly learn it all.
Yeah. It's so much to digest, but at the same time, I think it's with anything, like there's so much you can always learn too, which is crazy, especially now with everything that we mentioned, that with even YouTube tutorials, like you can literally,
oh my gosh,
teach yourself something from like the very beginning and get a good grasp on it, as long as you stay consistent,
Yeah. I was learning some of the Unity stuff. Have you jumped in there with that kind of stuff? I did this game jam with a friend of mine, a 48-hour game jam, just to kind of like teach ourselves more Unity, right? Like I've been using it, but I'm never really in the guts of it, like per se, right? I could set it up so people can call up anims, but not like coding this stuff or any of the effects stuff. And so it was kind of cool. I like how they make it so accessible for everybody. So I started taking some of my old Game Boy sprites and then putting it in there as like, as practice. And I was like, this is very cool. Like
Yeah.
I could see people getting totally lost in this. I could see myself getting lost in it too.
Yeah. Yeah. It's something similar where since I started doing everything with Twitch, like I'm also learning how to like do all these layouts. And I showed one of my friends the same thing, and he also got really inspired where now I think his layout is even more well done, because like it's kind of one of those things as artists, once we know like a new skill set or just have a way to customize something, then your imagination starts going crazy. You want to dive in there. So I would imagine it's the same thing with Unity, where once you actually understand like the fundamentals, then you're like, you mean I could do this? I could do this. So like the possibilities are endless at that point, you know?
Yeah.
That's awesome. Going back to the comics, or I should say the Comix Rant video, I think in one of your videos I had seen where you were referencing your own comic when I think you were drawing like one of the cop figures, and you had mentioned that in some instances you do reflect back to like look back at it just to see like if the references still match. Do you do that often, or are there some characters that you kind of memorize where like you don't need reference, where it's literally you just know like how to draw it on the spot? Or is it more where like you do it as like a reference point just to make sure that there's consistency?
Yeah, I think the main character. Okay, yeah, this is a good question because I just started getting into this.
Yeah,
the main character I can still draw her from memory. Like right. There's nothing really too hard about it.
Yeah.
But then some of the secondary characters, I actually had to look back at it. I was like, I don't remember how to draw this guy.
Yeah.
and that police officer saying, I definitely don't remember how to draw that guy.
Right.
Because they were like the tertiary characters, or not even like, they were like background characters. I don't even remember.
Right. Yeah.
Like I don't remember some of the uniforms that they wore. Some of the vehicles that are there, like, and this is not like super hard designs, right? But I still have to kind of look back, maybe because like the comic has taken me so long to draw,
right?
Because I'm doing this on my spare time after work and all that kind of stuff. I actually started this project like. I was looking at one of the copyright dates I put on. I think it was like 2008. It was like a long time ago.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was younger. So like, not married, without kids. So like my initial estimate was like, I was hoping I could do an issue a year.
Right.
But at this point, it's like an issue every 4 years or something like that. So you can imagine like I drew that thing 4 years ago. So now I have to like remind myself what all that stuff looked like. And even a page that I just drew recently, I had to import it into my iPad just so I could remember the line weight.
Oh, right.
Of what it looked like before. And it doesn't really matter, like part of comics that I like is like it kind of changes. Like you see somebody's style change with the issues. But, just for consistency's sake, like, it's like a clean line. It's like this old school, like Genndy Tartakovsky style that I'm trying to mimic here, like a Bruce Timm, like that kind of like slick line thing. So like I kind of have to like, I don't draw like that anymore.
Right.
So I kind of have to like practice a few times to like get to figure out how I draw the new stuff now.
Yeah. No, I think that makes sense because I think you can put that to the equivalent of a lot of things where if it's something similar to exercising, where if you don't do it often, then even though you've done it before, like your body has to get like used to doing that same process and that same routine. That I would imagine it's the same thing when you're trying to like hone down like a style or like a character in that case, of just being able to like refresh yourself and like get your hand like back in motion and just like get into that flow, as opposed to like when you were younger that it was super consistent, so like it's easier to knock them out. But it's kind of like getting back on like an exercise routine at that point. Exactly
what you said. Like I wish, like when I look back at when I was younger, I was so prolific. Like I just drew everything, like I didn't have a care in the world. Like nowadays it's like you got your own hangups about how you draw certain things, and it takes you like much longer to do it. And it's like, I want to get to a point where it's like, yeah, I don't care anymore. I'm just going to keep drawing.
Yeah. Which is perfect segue into one of my last questions is, so seeing how, you've had so much experience in all these different fields, what we wanted to get across with this show is to really open up like the, either the floodgates or in this way, kind of show younger artists like what it takes to kind of get into like the field that you want to get into. So what advice would you kind of give based on like your experience in either like, animation or in 3D to younger artists who are seeking like their first, like, maybe I'm trying to think of the right word, maybe the first like way to approach it, or what is the best way to approach like getting your foot in the door for any of those industries that they're interested in?
Oh man. Well, one thing for sure is to know a lot of people. I mean, like network, this is weird advice coming from an artist, right? Because we're introverts. Yeah. It's like, it's so hard, but it really does make a difference. Well, that goes without saying, I guess, but like in hindsight, when I think about it, like all my jobs are from people that I knew.
Right.
Like even my first job was from someone in a friend of mine in my Bible studies class.
Yeah.
Her boyfriend who worked somewhere else. And, and this person like made like the stretch to like say like, hey, why don't you, send me your stuff and we'll take a look.
Yeah.
And, and my first internship was like through teachers of mine in college that put us into the studio and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, this is not discounting, like, you should hone your craft, right? Like, I guess that's the other one that I would say, right? Like would be to know your stuff at the core. So like as an animator, like, sometimes I get a little bitter because I'll see like, what, working in the industry for 20 plus years and you're bitter?
Yeah.
So like,
no.
I'll see like, like some animators, and this is hard because like their selling point makes sense because it's knowing how to use a certain program.
Right.
Right. Or knowing like a certain technique. But for me, like personally, I feel like if you know the core of your craft, right, which is, not related to the tools, right? Like whatever, man, tools, they always change, especially like technology, right? Like, so sure, you'll be the new hotness, knowing all this other stuff, like knowing how to, I don't know, like how to work an Excel spreadsheet or whatever, right?
Yeah.
But in the future, it's going to change, right? Like, but if you, like, say, if you're not a good producer, like you don't know how to make things line up, like, or to even schedule things, or even to how to make sure certain processes are followed, then who cares if you know how to use Excel, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's the same way, like for artists, right? Like, you need to know the core of your animation, right? For me, like it'd be animation.
Right.
You need to know the core of that thing so you can apply it to the tools that you're using, right? I don't care if you know like Maya or whatever and all that stuff. Like you should know that stuff anyway. Those are just tools, but it's this core that people will see that will let you stand out from everybody else, right?
Yeah.
And I think this is what they hammered into us at RISD. So maybe that's the problem. It's all traditional.
Yeah.
Right? Like the core of animation, the principles of these animation concepts, you can apply to anything, basically, right? As long as you know it, right? Whatever people give you, whatever tools they give you, even if you're animating like user interface, right? All these core principles about animation still apply. And if you don't know that, if all you know how to do is to use this one tool, like say Flash,
right,
then you're screwed, right? Because Flash doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
Nobody really wants to. It's not even on the web anymore. So like now what are you gonna do? If you're just a Flash animator, what are you gonna do? It's gone.
Right.
So I think that's the main takeaway that I could impart. That and know a lot of people.
Yeah. I'll definitely second you on the know a lot of people.
Yeah.
I think my road has been very similar on that. On that. That's awesome because like the way that you said earlier in the interview, where you just kind of have to force yourself to like learn 3D by trial and error. It reminds me a lot of the stories that come from Disney, where when they first had to make the transition for like all the traditional 2D artists and animators to start working in these 3D programs, it was the same way, where like none of them probably knew how to work a mouse at the very beginning, but as long as they had those strong core fundamentals when it came to animation, as long as they had that core strength and deep knowledge on that, then they were just trying to learn a new skill set with this new 3D item. But then because they had such strong fundamentals, they found a way how to do it. And I think that's always a showcase of like, what true talent is in that sake,
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. So one last question for you. So I know this is probably very open, but from everything that you mentioned, what would you say is either your favorite or some of your favorite projects that you've worked on throughout your entire art career?
Oh, okay. So I had to think about that for a little bit when you sent me that question. So there's multiple things, but I think they kind of touch on different aspects that I liked. So one is like, I did an illustration. It was just for this gallery, or it was supposed to be for this exhibit about, I think, sounds morbid, but like what your depiction of, or what your belief is about the afterlife, or about life and whatever was after that, right? So I'm Christian. So the piece that I did was this person. It was kind of like this stylized person that was kind of and then he was like in a crowd of other stylized people that had like these big backpacks. But he had let his backpack down, and then he's kind of like reaching up like this. And then in the background, I kind of use a negative space. So they're in a forest, and the negative space forms like this hand that's kind of reaching down.
Oh, okay.
And to me, that was like my way of showing that, at least for Christianity, right? Like it's God reaching down to people, and you can cast your burdens off.
Right.
So it was something that I had to kind of wrap my head around, like to kind of, I don't like it when like some of the religious art is too obvious, or I don't know what I'm trying to look for here. I mean, that's all fine, but like if I'm going to do it, I just couldn't do it. Like I couldn't do it the same way. So I had to kind of put this kind of spin on it. And I liked it because it was so hard for me to figure it out.
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes sense. It was like, I didn't even make the deadline for that exhibit because it was so hard. Like I couldn't do it. Like it was like this mental block in my head. Like, how do I show this concept? Like, I hadn't arrived at it. I guess it was so heady, kind of like, how do you depict like your faith or your, or after, what do you do? It's so big. Like it could be anything.
Yeah.
So I actually drew it. I think I started doing it in ink, and it just looked bad. It just didn't look anything like I wanted. It didn't look like anything I wanted.
Yeah. And
then, so I missed the deadline, and then, I kind of abandoned it. And then after a while, I went back to it. I just had to do it because it was just an idea I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And I ended up doing it digitally.
Oh.
And it came out much closer to what I had thought about it that it would be in my head. And now it's actually one of my favorite pieces. I think because I struggled with it so much.
Right.
Usually, you'd hate something like that, but like, it's like, you don't want to like have to, like, you would think that the typical answer would be like something that came out so effortlessly.
Exactly. Yeah.
And it's so awesome, right? This one was so hard, but it was just so good for my brain to kind of try to wrestle.
Yeah.
And so that's the one. And that was like a solo thing.
Yeah.
And then the other one that I liked that was a collaborative thing was when I was like art lead for these Capcom games, these downloadable Capcom games. There were 2 of them, so they were kind of like scheduled like tight. Like it was like 4 months or something like that, like 8 months altogether, but like 2 games, downloadable games, and one was I think like Commando, Wolf for the Battlefield.
Oh, okay.
And the other one was 1942, Joint Strike. And in Commando, I liked it initially back then because I got to do all the character designs. You know, I got to set like the style, like I did like boss designs, robots, and you know, it was like this kind of like Team Fortressy style that we're trying to go for. And I worked with a really talented team, but that was hard. And like we couldn't get it to be like what we wanted it to be. And even like looking back at it now, I'm proud of it, but it's not what we wanted it to be. So this is in tandem with 1942. So right after that game, we made 1942. And 1942, I was so loose, like as an art lead. Like I knew what everybody could do.
Right.
I knew that they were awesome. Like, you know, in Commando, like I was so tight on it. I was, you know, character design. I did turnaround sheets. I was like rigging some of these things. I was modeling something. I was helping doing textures and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But in 1942, I had kind of like let go. So like I remember I was working with the UI artist there, Diana Fong, and you know, in Commando, I was so tight. Like I was like, okay, when you press the start button, I want like this guy's the bullet shooting out, and then it does like this fade, and then he comes sliding in, and there's all these effects, and then you see the UI come out.
Right.
And in 1942, I was like, do what you like. And she was like, what? I was like, yeah, you're awesome. I know what you can do. Like, you know, make it look like, you know, nostalgic 1942 and, you know, like wartime, and do whatever you want. And, you know, basically make it look cool. Right. And then show it to me and I'll tell you if it looks cool. And then, you know, we'll work from there. But she was kind of surprised that I was so loose.
Yeah.
And I think I like those 2 projects as one of the best experiences I had, but not because it was like effortless. Again, not because it was like, there was so much learning that happened because I was like struggling with things. And I think the satisfaction of knowing that the team that I worked on was so awesome.
Yeah.
Like, you know, they were like, I felt like, you know, I don't know if they felt that way, but I felt like I was working with like rock stars.
Exactly.
Like all these guys were so good at what they did. Everything looked great. You know, like, sure, like I'll help them with a little bit of stuff, but like they knew what they were doing, and it just looks so good. Like, but there's nothing in that game that'll point to like anything that I did.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, there's no physical thing in that game that's like, this is like the model that I made. There's nothing. There's nothing like that. But it turned like the design of that game was better. I felt it played better. You know, all these kind of things, and it's kind of like humbling,
right,
to know like, wow, it's because I let go that these people did so much better.
Yeah. It's amazing because I think you brought up probably the best 2 examples you could, where it's something that the first one was more of like going through your own personal experience and journey to like get to start to finish, and then with the second one, it's like it's showing that you can still have a journey that's going to have like ups and downs, but when you associate it with a team, then there's different layers, but the way that you approach it is rewarding in itself, because it's kind of like anything with when people compare it to people who've been in war or in like sporting events, where you grow a tighter bond based on like those ups and downs with people. That I think that's where you really build that camaraderie with people, and at the same time, those are the projects that stick out to you the most, because it wasn't perfect. You had to like really like learn as you went as a team to get better at something and to also complete whatever project that was. So I think what I learned was how to facilitate it so that the team worked better. Like, what can I do to make it so that you do good stuff? Right.
And the funny part is, I think I hope they're not going to watch this, but but at that company, there was a lot of things going on. There's a lot of politics going on, all this stuff going on, whatever. And for one reason or the other, I would get the people that were kind of like kicked out of stuff. Yeah. But maybe I don't know, maybe because they were rock stars, because they were awesome, right? Yeah. So maybe they butt heads with somebody else, and it was just difficult. But I would get them, and I just felt so. I guess maybe I was unthreatening. I don't know, but I would get them. And I was like, these guys are so good. I'm just gonna let them loose, let them go, let them do their thing, and maybe at that point in their careers they appreciate it. I don't know. I'm just totally making that up. I have no idea. Yeah. But I could see from their work, they would come out with some awesome stuff, some really good stuff that they would just do. And in my head, as I'm working with them, it's like, oh, I wonder why this was so hard for other people to work with these dudes, right. And when they came on the team, I was apprehensive because that's all I would hear.
Right.
But then, they gave me beautiful stuff. So I didn't have a complaint. They were awesome. They were giving me all these years of experience.
Yeah.
Into the game, and it shows. It just looked so good,
Yeah. It sounds very similar to. I literally just started watching the Last Dance documentary on Netflix.
Oh, nice. Are you comparing me to Michael Jordan? All right, I'll take it.
I'm actually comparing you to Phil Jackson. So
snap! Cause triangle, baby.
Yeah, because it's very similar. Where you have all these different personas, and everyone goes at it a different way, but all the players on that team, and in your case, all your teammates, have a true passion for what they're doing, except that they just feel more comfortable the way they approach it. And at that point, you did a really good job of just being able to see their strengths, as opposed to just seeing the typical where anyone can make the obvious connection to their weaknesses. You saw beneath that, where you could see their strengths, and to put them in that alignment where you're looking out for them, and also seeing what you can pull where you can pull the best out of them based on their comfortability. And I think that speaks to when you're a good mentor or a good coach in that sense, where as opposed to just giving up, you're just okay, I have what I have, and I'll not only am I going to make the best out of it or the most out of it, I'm going to pull out the best from people and actually have them enjoy it, and also for us as a team to enjoy it together. And I think that speaks volumes. And that's instantly what I thought of when you were describing all those folks.
I'll take it. Yeah, I'll be Phil Jackson. No problem.
Awesome. So, dude, this has been so much fun, and again, I really appreciate you making the time for this. And yeah, I think from all the stories that you kind of gave, hopefully it does give younger artists a true appreciation of what the process is with all these different fields, whether it be 2D or 3D or games and everything. That I hope they get inspired based on that, and also just know there's multiple ways to get to a path. Secretly for me, Monsters University is probably my favorite Pixar movie, because it kind of shows that route where, yeah, the traditional route is to go through college and you get the dream job, but it doesn't work out like that for a lot of people. That I think the moral that that movie and that story is that there are multiple ways to get to the finish line, and just because sometimes things don't work out the way you initially thought, you'll get there eventually if you put in the hard work and effort. So I think a lot of the stories you told definitely show that path. So I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Come on.
Yeah,
it's awesome.
Did you have any plugs or shout outs that you want to give out before we head out?
Oh, probably just check out my YouTube channel, Comix Rant. And I'm on Instagram under Biggedy, Biggedy. Yeah. But that's pretty much where I'm on. YouTube is mostly my thing right now. I'm trying to get that going.
And then if people wanted to buy the comic, where would they be able to find that?
Oh, okay. So on my channel, on all the notes or at the bottom, there's a link to get the comic books, which is the Bomb Squad. Mm-hmm. And those are also on sale on this site called Indie Planet.
Oh, okay.
So I think if you do a search for the Bomb Squad on indieplanet.com, you'll find it. But if you just go to my channel, the link's right there. So if you guys want to support me that way, that'd be pretty awesome too.
Awesome. Yeah, and I'll make sure that all the information is throughout the video and everything. So I'll make sure to copy over those links and put them on here. Awesome. So thank you so much again. And this was a lot of fun. And yeah, hope we can do it again soon.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Take care, dude.
Bye.
If you enjoyed this conversation and want to hear more, don't forget to like and subscribe.